The Great Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 standard cycles, its crystalline spires reaching toward the twin suns of Nexus Prime like fingers grasping at divine knowledge. Within its hallowed chambers, representatives from 800 civilizations gathered to discuss matters of cosmic importance. Trade routes, territorial disputes, technological exchanges, all the mundane business of keeping a galaxy from tearing itself apart. Ambassador Zekthara adjusted her ceremonial robes as she walked through the archive wing, her four eyes scanning the endless rows of data crystals that contained the history of every known species. As the Council's chief xenoarchaeologist, she had spent the last 50 cycles cataloging newly discovered civilizations, but today was different. Today, she carried a crystal that would change everything. The humans had been members of the Council for barely 3 cycles, having achieved faster-than-light travel through what they called slipspace drives. They were considered a young, energetic species, remarkable for their rapid technological advancement but unremarkable in their origins. Their home planet, Earth, was listed in the records as Terra 3, a standard Class M world in the Outer Rim territories. But Zekthara had been investigating inconsistencies in the ancient databases, cross-referencing mythological texts from dead civilizations with archaeological findings. What she discovered made her mandibles click nervously as she approached the council chamber. Inside the vast circular hall, nearly 800 beings from across the galaxy sat in their designated sections. The air hummed with the soft translation fields that allowed each species to communicate in their native tongue. At the center, the eternal flame burned blue-white, symbolizing the unity of all sapient life. Chancellor Vorthan, a towering crystalline being from the Arcturus system, called the session to order. We gather under the light of unity to discuss the matter brought before us by Ambassador Zekthara. The floor recognizes the chief xenoarchaeologist. Zekthara rose from her perch, her membranous wings rustling with nervous energy. Honored Council, I have made a discovery that challenges our fundamental understanding of galactic history. While investigating discrepancies in our archives, I have uncovered evidence regarding the true nature of the human homeworld. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Sarah Chen, leaned forward with interest rather than concern. They had no idea what was coming. 3 cycles ago, Zekthara continued, we welcomed humanity into our council based on their impressive technological achievements. We catalogued their homeworld as Terra 3, noting its abundant water, diverse ecosystems, and the rapid evolution of its dominant species. However, ancient texts from the Void Wars era contain references to a world that matches Earth's exact specifications, a world known by a very different name. She activated the holographic projector at the center of the chamber. Ancient symbols flickered to life, rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. The symbols were from the old script, a language so archaic that only a handful of scholars could still read it. These symbols were found in a terminus vault on the dead world of Kethmoran, sealed behind temporal locks that required 12 different extinct languages to decode. They speak of a world that was quarantined. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Quarantined worlds were theoretical concepts in galactic law, planets so dangerous that they had to be isolated from the rest of the galaxy. In 12,000 cycles, no quarantined world had ever been confirmed to exist. Chancellor Vorthan's crystalline form darkened. You speak of legends, Ambassador. Surely you do not suggest that I suggest nothing, Zekthara interrupted, her voice gaining strength. I present facts. The world described in these texts is called Hadalkothaith in the old script. Translated into Standard Galactic, it means the Forge of Nightmares or more literally, Death World. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species began speaking at once, their translation fields creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Some laughed dismissively, others demanded proof, but a few, the older species who still remembered fragments of the Void Wars, fell silent with a look of dawning horror. Ambassador Chen stood up, her voice cutting through the noise with surprising authority. If I may, honored council, I fail to see how ancient mythology relates to Earth. Our world is peaceful. We've had our conflicts, certainly, but we've overcome them. We're here as proof of that. Zekthara's 4 eyes fixed on the human ambassador with something approaching pity. Honored human, tell me about your world's oceans. Our oceans? Chen looked confused. They cover about 70% of Earth's surface. They're vital to our ecosystem, and how deep are they? The deepest point is the Mariana Trench, reaching down about 11 kilometers. A collective intake of breath echoed through the chamber. Zekthara nodded grimly. According to the texts, Hadalkothaith was primarily oceanic, with depths reaching over 10 of your kilometers. The name Hadal refers to the deepest zone of your oceans, a place of crushing darkness where no light penetrates. Chen's confidence wavered slightly. That's just a coincidence. Many worlds have deep oceans. Tell me about your planet's gravity. Standard gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. And your atmospheric pressure? 1 standard atmosphere at sea level. Zekthara manipulated the hologram, and new symbols appeared. The texts describe a world with crushing gravity and dense atmosphere, conditions that would forge inhabitants into beings of incredible physical resilience. Tell me, Ambassador Chen, what is the average strength of a human compared to other council species? The question hung in the air as uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. Every species present knew the answer. Humans were notorious for their physical capabilities. A single human could overpower most other sapient beings through sheer brute force. Their military applications had been carefully regulated when they joined the council, not because they were aggressive, but because they were so devastatingly effective when they chose to be. Furthermore, Zekthara continued relentlessly, the texts speak of creatures that emerged from Hadalkothetha's oceans, beings that could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods, that could endure radiation levels that would kill most species, that possessed an almost supernatural ability to adapt to hostile environments. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Humans can hold their breath for several minutes underwater. They can survive in environments with radiation levels that would be fatal to most council species. They adapt to different atmospheric compositions faster than any known biology should allow. Ambassador Chen's face had gone pale. You're talking about natural human physiology. We evolved on a challenging world, yes, but that doesn't make us. Tell me about human recreational activities, Zekthara interrupted. I'm sorry? Your species' idea of entertainment. What do humans do for fun? Chen looked around the chamber, suddenly, aware that hundreds of alien eyes were focused on her. We have many recreational activities. Sports, arts, music. What kind of sports? Chen's mouth went dry. She thought about football, where armored humans charged into each other at full speed. About hockey, where players wielded clubs and body-checked each other into walls. About boxing, where the objective was to render your opponent unconscious through repeated blows to the head. About extreme sports like base jumping, free climbing, and deep-sea diving. We enjoy competitive activities, she managed weakly. According to the texts, Zekthara said, the inhabitants of Hadalkotheth were noted for their peculiar trait of creating increasingly dangerous challenges for themselves when their environment became too comfortable. They would seek out peril as a form of entertainment. The Altarian representative, a being that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a plant, made a sound like wind through crystal chimes. The humans' extreme sports are legendary throughout the council territories. They are the only species we know that seeks out mortal danger for pleasure. We're not unique in that, Chen protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Name another species that jumps from aircraft for fun, challenged the Rigelian delegate. Chen couldn't answer. Zekthara activated another section of the hologram. The texts describe the inhabitants of Hadalkotheth as persistence hunters, beings that would pursue their prey across vast distances, not through speed or strength alone, but through an almost supernatural ability to simply keep going when all other creatures would collapse from exhaustion. The chamber fell silent again. Every species present had heard the stories about human endurance. Humans were the only known species that could run continuously for hours without stopping. Their ambassador Chen herself had once jogged 15 kilometers to a diplomatic meeting when her transport broke down, arriving barely winded while her alien companions required medical attention after walking the same distance. The quarantine, whispered Counselor Nexeth from the vegan system, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. Why was the world quarantined? Zekthara's expression grew grave. According to the final entries in the texts, Hadalkotheth was quarantined not because its inhabitants were evil, but because they were too effective. The texts speak of explorers from that world who left to find other challenges, other environments to test themselves against. Wherever they went, they didn't conquer through malice, they simply survived everything the universe threw at them, and then thrived. She manipulated the hologram again, and a star map appeared showing ancient trade routes that had mysteriously ceased operation millennia ago. The Void Wars weren't fought between different species, she said quietly. They were fought to contain the spread of Hadalkotheth's children. The galaxy's elder species made a terrible choice, they burned entire systems to prevent the nightmare-forged beings from spreading further. Chancellor Vorthan's crystalline form had turned nearly black. You're suggesting that the humans are descendants of these creatures? I'm not suggesting anything, Zekthara replied. I'm stating facts. The coordinates in these texts, when converted to modern navigation systems, point to exactly one location in the galaxy. She activated the final section of her presentation. A three-dimensional map of local space appeared, with trade routes, territorial boundaries, and stellar phenomena marked in brilliant detail. At the edge of the map, in what was considered the unremarkable outer rim, a small yellow star pulsed with a soft light. Sol system, Zekthara announced. The third planet from that star is listed in our records as Terra 3. But, according to these ancient texts, that world has another name. A name that struck terror into the hearts of a galaxy. The hologram zoomed in on Earth's location, and ancient symbols appeared around it, pulsing with ominous light. Hadal Kothaith, she whispered. The Forge of Nightmares. The Death World. The quarantine planet that was supposed to remain sealed forever. Ambassador Chen stood frozen as the weight of revelation crashed down upon her. All around the chamber, representatives from 800 civilizations stared at the small human delegation with a mixture of awe and growing terror. The quarantine seals, Chancellor Vorthan said in a voice like breaking glass. If the humans have achieved interstellar travel, if they've broken through the barriers. The barriers failed long ago, Zekthara confirmed. The ancient technology couldn't maintain itself forever. The humans have been free for millennia, they just didn't know they were ever imprisoned. The chamber erupted into chaos again, but this time it wasn't confusion or debate. It was panic. Representatives began activating emergency communication devices, sending messages to their home worlds. Others demanded immediate evacuation protocols. The carefully maintained order of the Galactic Council began to crumble as the truth sank in. Humanity wasn't just another species that had achieved space travel. They were the return of the nightmare that had once consumed half the galaxy. And they didn't even know it. The emergency session had been called within 6 hours of Zekthara's revelation. The Great Council Chamber, usually a place of measured debate and diplomatic protocol, had transformed into something resembling a war room. Security forces from a dozen species surrounded the building, while inside, the most senior representatives from the galaxy's oldest civilizations huddled in urgent consultation. Ambassador Chen sat in isolation with her small human delegation, watched by guards who tried to appear casual but whose hands never strayed far from their weapons. The other humans, Dr. Marcus Webb, their scientific advisor, and Captain Rita Vesquez, their military attaché, looked confused and increasingly concerned as the hours dragged on. Sarah, Dr. Webb whispered, what exactly did they accuse us of? I've been going over the translation feeds, but half of this ancient language stuff isn't making sense. Chen stared at her hands, still processing what she'd heard. They think we're descendants of some kind of galactic boogeyman. A species so dangerous that the entire galaxy went to war to contain it. Captain Vasquez snorted quietly. That's ridiculous. We're explorers, not conquerors. Hell, we barely managed to stop fighting among ourselves long enough to build starships. That's what worries me, Chen murmured. What if they're right about some of it? What if we really are different in ways we never understood? Before anyone could respond, Chancellor Vorthan called for order. The ancient being's crystalline form had deepened to an ominous dark purple, a color that other council members recognized as a sign of extreme distress. The emergency consultation has concluded, Vorthan announced. We have reached consensus among the elder species. Ambassador Zekthara will present additional evidence that has come to light. Zekthara rose again, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood representatives from the three oldest known civilizations, Primarch Kuldar of the Eternal Hegemony, Oracle Veshtai of the Cosmic Listeners, and, most shocking of all, a figure that most council members had never seen before, an architect. The architects were legendary, one of the few species older than the council itself. They rarely involved themselves in galactic politics, preferring to observe from their hidden enclaves scattered across the galaxy. The fact that one had come forward suggested that the situation was far more serious than anyone had imagined. The architect stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body covered in what appeared to be living metal that shifted and flowed like mercury. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to vibrate in dimensions beyond normal perception. I am Construct Mind Zephyr 9, it announced. I have monitored galactic civilization for 8,000 cycles. I was present during the Void Wars. I witnessed the quarantine protocol. A hush fell over the chamber. Even the emergency lighting seemed to dim in the presence of such ancient authority. The species you call human are indeed the genetic descendants of the HFY strain, Zephyr 9 continued. But, the situation is far more complex than the archaeological record suggests. The architect gestured, and the chamber's holographic systems activated with technology far beyond anything the council possessed. The display showed not just star charts, but something that looked like a four-dimensional map of causality itself. The quarantine protocol was not designed to imprison the HFY strain, Zephyr 9 explained. It was designed to protect them. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. Ambassador Chen felt her heart skip a beat as the implications began to dawn on her. Protect them from what? Chancellor Vorthen managed to ask. From themselves, the architect replied. And, from us. The holographic display zoomed in on Earth's location, but now it showed the planet as it had existed millennia ago, surrounded by a web of energy barriers that looked like crystalline geometries folded through spacetime. The inhabitants of HFY were not quarantined because they were conquerors, Zephyr 9 continued. They were quarantined because they were perfect. Oracle Veshtai, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, spoke for the first time. Her voice sounded like the cosmic wind between stars. The HFY strain represented the theoretical limit of biological adaptation. They could survive in any environment, overcome any challenge, adapt to any threat. They were evolution perfected. Dr. Webb leaned forward, his scientific training overcoming his fear. But, that sounds like a good thing. Why would that require quarantine? Primarch Koldar answered, his mechanical voice cold with ancient memory. Because perfection, Dr. Webb, is incompatible with diversity. The HFY strain didn't conquer through violence, they conquered through simple superiority. Everywhere they went, they became the dominant lifeform not through malice, but through inevitable biological supremacy. The hologram shifted, showing ancient worlds where the familiar hexagonal structures of HFY colonies had replaced the organic cities of other species. But there were no signs of war, no evidence of destruction. The other species had simply faded away. They were too good at surviving, Zekthara explained quietly. Too good at adapting. Too good at thriving in conditions that would challenge other species. Wherever they settled, within a few generations, they had optimized their environment so thoroughly that other life forms couldn't compete. Captain Vasquez stood up abruptly. Now wait just a minute. You're talking about humans like we're some kind of invasive species. We've been sharing space with other civilizations for 3 years now, and we haven't optimized anybody out of existence. Constructmind Zephyr 9 turned its attention to the human delegation, and Chen felt a chill run down her spine as those alien sensors focused on her. Captain Vasquez, in the 3 cycles since humanity joined the Council, how many of your species have established permanent residences on non-human worlds? Vasquez blinked. Well, there are human communities on about 40 different planets now. But, those are just normal colony settlements. And, how are those colonies performing compared to the native populations? The question hung in the air. Chen realized with growing horror that she knew the answer. Human colonies consistently outperformed native settlements in terms of resource efficiency, technological adaptation, and population growth. It had been a source of pride for humanity, they were good neighbors, productive citizens of the galactic community. But, now, seen in a different light. We're not trying to outcompete anyone, Dr. Webb protested. We're just living our lives. Of course you're not trying, Oracle Veshtai replied sadly. That's what makes your species so terrifying. You don't conquer through malice. You conquer through excellence. The architect manipulated the holographic display again, showing population charts, resource utilization data, and economic indicators for human colonies throughout Council space. The pattern was unmistakable. Wherever humans settled, they didn't destroy the existing civilization, they simply became indispensable to it. Human agricultural techniques increase crop yields by an average of 30%, Zephyr 9 noted clinically. Human engineering innovations improve infrastructure efficiency by 25%. Human medical knowledge has extended the average lifespan of 12 different Council species. Human diplomatic methods have resolved trade disputes that had persisted for centuries. Chen felt sick. You're saying we're too helpful? You're saying you're too perfect, Primarch Koldar corrected. Just as your ancestors were. The Hadalkothaith strain didn't set out to dominate the galaxy. They simply lived, and, wherever they lived, they became essential. Other species didn't die out, they became dependent. The hologram shifted to show historical data from before the Void Wars. Ancient civilizations that had made contact with Hadalkothaith colonies showed the same pattern. Increased prosperity, longer lifespans, improved technology, greater social stability, and a gradual loss of their own cultural identity as they adopted increasingly human-like social structures. The Void Wars weren't fought to destroy the Hadalkothaith strain, Zephyr 9 explained. They were fought to preserve galactic diversity. The choice was simple: allow one species to slowly, peacefully, inadvertently assimilate the entire galaxy, or take drastic action to prevent it. Chancellor Vorthan's crystalline form had turned almost black with distress. The quarantine was designed to give your species time to develop an isolation, to learn restraint, to become something other than perfect biological supremacists. But it failed, Oracle Veshtai added mournfully. Isolation only made you stronger. Cut off from galactic civilization, you turned your adaptability inward. You overcame ice ages, asteroid impacts, massive volcanic eruptions, and countless other extinction events. You didn't just survive, you thrived in conditions that would have destroyed any other known species. Dr. Webb was frantically taking notes on his tablet. This is impossible. You're talking about genetic determinism on a galactic scale. Evolution doesn't work that way. Evolution on Hadalkothaith doesn't work like evolution anywhere else, the architect replied. Your world is unique in the galaxy, possibly in the universe. The combination of gravitational stress, radiation exposure, extreme weather patterns, and predatory ecosystems created evolutionary pressures that no other planet has ever matched. The holographic display zoomed in on Earth itself, showing cross-sections of the planet's structure. Chen gasped as she saw what the alien sensors revealed. Earth wasn't just a heavy gravity world, its core was riddled with exotic matter deposits that created localized fields of spacetime distortion. The planet itself was a natural testing ground that had subjected every life form on its surface to constant, low-level stress that pushed evolution far beyond normal parameters. Your species didn't just evolve intelligence, Zekthara explained. You evolved meta-intelligence, the ability to consciously direct your own adaptation. Every human challenge, from learning to walk to mastering complex technology, is a form of directed evolution. Captain Vasquez sank back into her chair. You're saying we're not normal. You're saying you're not natural, Primarch Koldar corrected. Your species represents what happens when evolution itself is optimized. You are living weapons forged by the universe's most perfect killing field. The chamber fell silent as the full weight of the revelation settled over everyone present. Ambassador Chen looked around at her fellow humans and saw the same realization dawning in their eyes. Every human strength, every natural ability they'd taken for granted, every advantage they'd attributed to luck or hard work, it was all the result of evolutionary pressures that no other species had survived. So what happens now? Chen asked quietly. The representatives of the three elder species exchanged looks that needed no translation. After a long moment, ConstructMind Zephyr 9 spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. Now we decide whether to reinstate the quarantine protocol, or evacuate the galaxy before the inevitable assimilation begins. The implications of that statement hit the Council like a nuclear weapon. 800 civilizations, trillions of beings, thousands of years of accumulated culture and knowledge, all potentially at risk from a species that conquered through the simple act of being too good at existing. And, the most terrifying part was that humanity had no idea they were doing it. The debate that followed would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. But, as the arguments raged around them, the human delegation sat in stunned silence, grappling with the knowledge that they weren't just explorers who had reached for the stars. They were the return of the galaxy's greatest nightmare. And, this time, there might be nowhere left to run. The emergency session had stretched into its third day, and the Great Council chamber showed signs of the strain. Representatives who normally maintained perfect diplomatic composure now huddled in nervous clusters, their conversations conducted in hushed tones that the translation fields could barely process. Security forces had tripled, and several species had quietly begun evacuating their diplomatic staff. Ambassador Chen had barely slept, spending the long hours reviewing everything she thought she knew about human history, human nature, and humanity's place in the galaxy. The revelations kept coming in waves, each one more disturbing than the last. Dr. Webb had requested access to the Council's biological databases, and what he'd found there had shaken him to his core. "Sarah," he whispered urgently as they prepared for another day of testimony, "I've been comparing human physiology to the other Council species. The differences aren't just significant, they're impossible." "What do you mean impossible?" Chen asked, though she was beginning to dread the answer. "I mean that human biology violates several fundamental principles of evolutionary development. Our muscle density is too high for our body weight. Our neural processing speed is too fast for our brain size. Our immune system is too adaptive for our species' age. And our psychological resilience." He shook his head. "Sarah, according to every model of sapient development, humans should have gone extinct from stress-induced madness within 1,000 years of achieving consciousness." Captain Vasquez looked up from her own research. "It gets worse. I've been reviewing our military exchanges with other Council species. Remember those friendly competitions we participated in?" Chen nodded. The interspecies military exercises had been designed to promote cooperation and mutual understanding between the different armed forces. "We won everything," Vasquez continued grimly. "Not just combat exercises, logistics, strategy, endurance trials, equipment maintenance, even morale and unit cohesion. The other species weren't competing with us. They were being systematically outclassed by what they thought was a young, inexperienced military." Before Chen could respond, Chancellor Vorthen called the session to order. Today's panel included not just the elder species, but representatives from the Galactic Medical Consortium, the Institute for Sapient Development, and, most ominously, the Department of Extinction Prevention. Dr. Yalmoth from the Medical Consortium spoke first, her jellyfish-like form pulsing with nervous bioluminescence. "The human delegation has requested medical clarification regarding their species' biological parameters. I must inform the Council that our analysis confirms the worst-case scenarios." The holographic display activated, showing detailed biological comparisons between humans and other Council species. The data was presented as overlapping bell curves, with most species clustering around the galactic average for various capabilities. Humanity appeared as a series of extreme outliers. Human cardiovascular efficiency is approximately 400% above the galactic average, Dr. Yalmoth continued. Their muscular development suggests they evolved in gravity fields nearly 3 times stronger than their current homeworld. Their nervous system shows adaptations for survival in environments with radiation levels that would be lethal to most known life forms. She manipulated the display to show cellular-level analysis. Most disturbing is their recovery capability. Humans can survive injuries that would kill any other Council species, and they heal from damage that we would consider permanent disability. Their immune system actively learns from exposure to pathogens, becoming stronger with each challenge rather than depleted. Dr. Webb stood up, his voice cracking slightly. "Dr. Yalmoth, are you saying that humans are physiologically incapable of being permanently weakened?" "I'm saying, Dr. Webb, that your species appears to be designed specifically to overcome any challenge the universe can present. You don't just adapt to threats, you become stronger because of them." The implications sent a chill through the chamber. Professor Nexeth from the Institute for Sapient Development took over the presentation, his crystalline thought patterns creating complex geometric displays in the air above his location. "From a developmental psychology perspective, the human pattern is equally disturbing," he announced. "Most sapient species show predictable learning curves. Humans show exponential adaptation curves that should be mathematically impossible." The display shifted to show educational achievement data. When humans join interspecies academic programs, they consistently outperform students from species with millions of years of evolutionary head start. But the truly alarming pattern is what happens to the other students. Chen leaned forward. "What happens to them?" "They begin adopting human learning methodologies," Professor Nexeth explained. "Human approaches to problem solving, human social structures, human competitive frameworks. Within a single academic cycle, mixed species institutions begin to resemble human institutions. The other species don't report feeling coerced or pressured, they simply find human methods more effective." Captain Vasquez felt her stomach drop. "You're saying we're intellectually invasive?" "I'm saying you're intellectually optimized," the professor corrected. Human cognitive patterns represent maximum efficiency solutions to most learning challenges. Other species exposed to human thinking methods naturally adopt them because they work better. The representative from the Department of Extinction Prevention, an entity that looked like a floating cluster of metallic spores, added its analysis to the growing body of evidence. We have been monitoring the demographic changes in council space since human integration began 3 cycles ago. The pattern is unprecedented and accelerating. New data filled the holographic display, showing population movements, cultural shifts, and technological adoption rates across the galaxy. In systems with significant human populations, we observe rapid convergence toward human social models. This includes governmental structures, economic systems, family organizations, and even recreational activities. Ambassador Chen watched in horror as the data showed human influence spreading like a gentle plague across the galaxy. Wherever humans settled, other species gradually began organizing their societies along human lines. Not through conquest or coercion, but through simple exposure to more efficient ways of living. The projected timeline for total galactic cultural convergence is approximately 50 cycles, the entity continued. At current rates of expansion and influence, the galaxy will become functionally human within 2 standard generations. A representative from the Regelian Trade Federation stood up, his multiple eye stalks twitching with agitation. This is preposterous. We've been trading with humans for 3 years. They're excellent partners, honest, efficient, creative. They've helped us solve logistical problems that had plagued our trade routes for centuries. Exactly, replied Construct Mind Zephyr 9. You described the problem perfectly. Humans don't conquer through force. They conquer through competence. The architect activated a new display showing economic data from human-influenced sectors. Human trading practices increase profit margins by an average of 40% while reducing operational complexity by 60%. Human contract law reduces trade disputes by 90%. Human logistics algorithms optimize shipping routes in ways that our finest mathematicians never conceived. Chancellor Vorthan's crystalline form darkened further. The result is that trade with humans becomes addictive. Other species begin restructuring their entire economies around human methodologies because they cannot compete otherwise. Dr. Webb was frantically scribbling notes, his scientific mind trying to process the implications. But surely this is just normal technological and cultural exchange? Every species learns from others, right? Oracle Veshtai responded with the sadness of eons in her voice. Dr. Webb, in normal cultural exchange, influence flows in multiple directions. Species learn from each other, creating hybrid solutions that blend the best of different approaches. She manipulated the data display to show historical patterns of cultural exchange between non-human species. The result looked like a complex web of interconnections, with innovations flowing back and forth between different civilizations. Now observe the pattern with human involvement, she continued. The display shifted to show the last 3 years. Instead of a complex web, the pattern looked like spokes of a wheel, with human innovations radiating outward while very little flowed back toward human space. Other species contribute raw materials and infrastructure to support human innovations, Oracle Veshtai explained. But the fundamental intellectual and cultural developments all originate from human space. You don't learn from us, you optimize us. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the problem became clear. Humanity wasn't conquering the galaxy through military might or political manipulation. They were conquering it by being better at existing than anyone else. Captain Vasquez broke the silence. So what are our options? You can't put us back in quarantine. There are already human colonies on 40 worlds, and more launching every month. Premarch Koldar's mechanical voice carried the weight of difficult calculations. The elder species have identified 3 possible courses of action. The holographic display shifted to show 3 branching timeline projections. Option 1, immediate reimplementation of the quarantine protocol. This would require the forced relocation of all human populations back to Earth, followed by the reconstruction of isolation barriers. Success probability, 12%. Estimated casualties, 47 million humans, unknown collateral damage to other species. The chamber erupted in protests from multiple directions, but Koldar continued relentlessly. Option 2, controlled migration protocols. Strict limits on human expansion, mandatory genetic monitoring, and cultural isolation procedures to prevent further contamination of non-human societies. Success probability, 31%. Implementation time, approximately 200 cycles. More protests filled the air, but the pre-march pressed on. Option 3, managed galactic evacuation. The systematic relocation of non-human populations to sectors beyond the range of human expansion, effectively ceding local galactic space to the inevitable human optimization process. Success probability, 68%. Estimated displacement, 800 billion sentient beings. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Chen felt the weight of 800 civilizations staring at her and her species, all of them trying to process the magnitude of what they faced. There has to be a fourth option, Chen said desperately. We're not monsters. We don't want to destroy galactic diversity. There has to be some way for us to coexist without. She trailed off as she realized what she was about to say. Without being human. Without excelling at everything they touched. Without being themselves. The architect studied the human delegation for a long moment before responding. There may be a fourth option, Ambassador Chen. But it would require humanity to make a choice that no species in galactic history has ever been asked to make. What choice? Chen asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. The choice to deliberately limit your own potential, Construct Mind Zephyr 9 replied. To consciously accept inefficiency, to embrace suboptimal solutions, to allow other species to succeed even when you could do better. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a funeral shroud. They weren't just asking humanity to change their behavior, they were asking them to deny their fundamental nature as the universe's most successful adaptation. The choice, Oracle Veshtai added sadly, between being human and allowing the rest of the galaxy to remain themselves. And, for the first time since the crisis began, Ambassador Chen had no idea what the right answer could possibly be. The fourth day of the emergency session began with an unprecedented development. As Ambassador Chen entered the council chamber, she discovered that the human delegation was no longer alone. Scattered throughout the vast amphitheater were beings she had never seen before, ancient creatures whose very presence seemed to bend reality around them. The observers have come forward, Chancellor Vorthan explained, his crystalline form now so dark it seemed to absorb light. They have not spoken in the council for over 4,000 cycles. The observers were legends even among the elder species. They predated not just the current galactic civilization, but the three previous ones that had risen and fallen before it. They were said to be the galaxy's memory keepers, watching and recording but never interfering. The fact that they had chosen to break their silence now sent waves of terror through the assembled representatives. The largest observer, a being that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime, spoke in a voice that resonated through dimensions beyond human perception. We are Witness Prime Temporal 7, it announced. We have observed the cycle that began with the first emergence of the Hadal Kathaith strain. We have watched its repetition across 4 galactic civilizations. We speak now because the pattern must be broken. Dr. Webb gripped his tablet so tightly his knuckles went white. For civilizations? You're saying this has happened before? The Hadal Kathaith strain emerges every 67 million cycles, the observer replied. It is not a natural evolutionary development. It is a test. The chamber exploded into chaos, but the observer's presence silenced all protest with a casual gesture that seemed to freeze time itself. Your species, Ambassador Chen, are not the products of random evolution. You are the products of deliberate design. The holographic systems activated without any visible input, displaying something that defied understanding. It looked like a blueprint, but one drawn across space and time itself. Earth appeared at the center, but it was surrounded by geometric patterns that extended through dimensions the human mind couldn't properly process. Hadal Kathaith is an engineered world, Witness Prime continued. It was designed by the architect's predecessors as a testing ground for the ultimate question: can a galaxy achieve true unity without losing diversity? Can perfection and plurality coexist? Construct Mind Zephyr 9, the architect representative, actually seemed to shrink in the presence of the observers. Honored Ancient, we had theorized about our Creator's intentions, but we never knew. You never knew because you were not meant to know, another observer interjected. This one appeared as a shifting pattern of mathematical equations that somehow conveyed consciousness. Each galactic civilization has been allowed to develop naturally until the Hadal Kathaith strain emerges. Then, we observe how they respond to the test. Ambassador Chen felt reality shifting around her as the implications became clear. You're saying the entire galaxy is, what? An experiment? A university, Witness Prime corrected. A place where civilizations can learn the hardest lesson in existence: how to handle absolute advantage responsibly. Professor Nexus from the Institute for Sapient Development managed to overcome his awe enough to ask, what happened to the previous civilizations that faced this test? The observers exchanged what might have been glances across multiple dimensions. The first civilization chose warfare, one replied. They attempted to destroy the Hadelkafeth strain through superior technology and numbers. Both the strain and the civilization were annihilated in the resulting conflict. The second chose isolation, another added. They implemented perfect quarantine protocols and maintained separation for millions of cycles. Both cultures stagnated and eventually collapsed from internal decay. The third chose submission, a third observer continued. They willingly allowed themselves to be absorbed by the Hadelkafeth strain, believing that unity was worth the cost of individuality. The resulting civilization was perfectly efficient and completely sterile. It lasted barely 1,000,000 cycles before terminal cultural entropy set in. Captain Vasquez stood up, her military training helping her cut through the metaphysical implications to reach the tactical reality. So we're test number 4. And, from what you're describing, nobody's passed this test yet. Correct, Witness Prime confirmed. Each failure has provided valuable data about the parameters of the problem. Your current galactic civilization has achieved the highest baseline development of any previous iteration. You have the greatest potential for success. Or the greatest potential for catastrophic failure, Oracle Veshtai added grimly. Dr. Webb raised his hand tentatively. Can I ask, what happens if we fail too? The observers fell silent for a moment that stretched across several dimensions. Finally, Witness Prime answered. If this iteration fails, the experiment ends. The galaxy will be reset to pre-sapient conditions, and the process will begin again with new species. But there will be no fifth iteration. This is the final test. The weight of that revelation crashed down on everyone present. Not just humanity's future was at stake, but the existence of every thinking being in the galaxy. 800 civilizations, trillions of lives, millions of years of accumulated culture and knowledge, all hanging in the balance of how one species handled being too good at everything. Chancellor Vorthan spoke in a voice like cracking ice. Honored observers, surely you can provide guidance? Some hint about how we might succeed where others failed. We can provide information, Witness Prime replied. The choice must be yours. The holographic display shifted, showing detailed analysis of humanity's expansion pattern over the past 3 years. But now the data was overlaid with projections based on the failures of previous civilizations. The Hadelkafeth strain possesses one unique characteristic that distinguishes it from normal evolutionary development, the observer explained. It is capable of conscious self-modification. Humans can choose to change themselves at the genetic, psychological, and social levels if they have sufficient motivation and understanding. Ambassador Chan leaned forward. You're saying we can evolve ourselves differently? Choose what kind of species we become. More than that, another observer interjected. You can choose how you interact with the galaxy. Previous strains became locked into their patterns of optimization. They could not conceive of deliberately accepting suboptimal outcomes for the greater good. But humans have demonstrated this capability, Witness Prime continued. Your species regularly makes individual sacrifices for collective benefit. You have shown the ability to choose inefficiency when it serves larger purposes. The question is whether you can scale the choice to galactic proportions. Dr. Webb was frantically taking notes. What kind of self-modification are we talking about? Genetic engineering? Cultural restructuring? Some kind of technological limitation? The observer that appeared as living mathematics responded by projecting a new set of equations into the chamber. The solution requires modification at all levels simultaneously. Genetic changes to reduce the efficiency differential between humans and other species. Cultural modifications to embrace collaborative rather than optimizing approaches. Technological limitations to prevent accidental obsolescence of other civilizations. In essence, Witness Prime summarized, humanity must choose to become deliberately imperfect. The silence that followed was broken by Captain Vasquez laughing, a sound that carried more hysteria than humor. You're asking us to lobotomize ourselves. To make ourselves worse at being alive. We're asking you to make yourselves compatible with galactic diversity, Oracle Veshtai corrected gently. To find a way to excel without making others obsolete. Is that even possible? Chen asked desperately. Construct Mind Zephyr 9 activated new projections showing theoretical models. Our calculations suggest several potential approaches. Genetic modifications that reduce human physical advantages while maintaining intelligence. Cultural frameworks that channel human competitiveness into non-displacement activities. Technological solutions that allow humans to excel in space exploration while leaving terrestrial civilizations room to develop independently. But each approach requires humanity to make sacrifices that go against every survival instinct your species possesses, Pre-March Koldar added. You would be choosing to become less than you could be, permanently, for the benefit of species you barely know. Dr. Webb looked up from his calculations. And, if we refuse? If we decide that we'd rather be ourselves and let the galaxy adapt as it will? The observers exchanged another multidimensional consultation. Then, you will follow the pattern of the third iteration, Witness Prime replied. Gradual, peaceful, inevitable assimilation of all galactic civilization into human optimal frameworks. Perfect efficiency, absolute unity, and complete sterility. The galaxy becomes human, and, within a million cycles, humanity dies from lack of challenges to overcome. But, if we change ourselves, Chen said slowly, if we deliberately make ourselves less perfect, what guarantee is there that the modifications will work? What if we sacrifice our nature and the galaxy fails anyway? There is no guarantee, the observer admitted. This is why it is a test. The choice must be made without certainty of outcome. Previous civilizations failed because they chose based on fear, on calculations of advantage, on the desire for control. Success requires a choice based on faith, another observer added. Faith that diversity is worth more than efficiency. That collaboration is more valuable than optimization. That the galaxy is better served by many imperfect voices than by one perfect song. The chamber fell into contemplation as the magnitude of the decision became clear. Humanity had to choose between remaining true to their nature and, potentially destroying galactic diversity, or fundamentally altering what it meant to be human to preserve something they might not even understand. And, they had to make that choice not just for themselves, but for every thinking being in the galaxy. How long do we have to decide? Ambassador Chen asked. The pattern analysis suggests that the critical threshold will be reached within 10 cycles, Witness Prime replied. After that point, the assimilation process becomes irreversible regardless of what humanity chooses. 10 years to decide the fate of a galaxy. 10 years to choose between human nature and galactic diversity. 10 years to pass a test that had already destroyed 3 civilizations. Ambassador Chen looked around the chamber at the representatives of 800 species, all of them watching her with expressions ranging from hope to terror to resignation. The weight of their expectations, their fears, and their futures pressed down on her like the gravity of the homeworld that had forged humanity into something too perfect for its own good. The test had begun, and failure was not an option. But neither, it seemed, was success. 6 months after the revelation that had shattered everything humanity thought they knew about themselves, Ambassador Chen stood in the renovated council chamber, but she was no longer the same person who had walked into that first emergency session. None of them were. The chamber itself had been transformed. Where once there had been rigid hierarchical seating arrangements, now there were fluid, adaptive spaces that could be reconfigured for different types of collaboration. The central holographic display had been replaced with something that looked less like a projection system and, more like a living work of art, a crystalline structure that could visualize ideas in ways that transcended any single species' perceptual limitations. But, the most dramatic change was in the participants themselves. The human delegation had grown from 3 to nearly 100, representing every major faction of humanity. But, they weren't the only ones who had changed. Representatives from other species now worked alongside human colleagues in ways that would have been unthinkable before the crisis began. Dr. Webb, now bearing the title of Director of Human Galactic Integration Studies, activated the central display to show the results of 6 months of intensive collaboration. The data was staggering in its scope and ambition. The solution we've developed isn't perfect, he announced to the assembled representatives. But, we believe it represents something unprecedented in galactic history, a conscious choice by an entire species to redefine their relationship with existence itself. The display showed a complex web of interconnected modifications that humanity had agreed to implement. But, unlike the crude genetic engineering or cultural suppression that previous civilizations had attempted, this was something entirely different. "We call it the Symbiosis Protocol," Ambassador Chen explained, her voice carrying the weight of difficult decisions made with clear eyes. "Rather than making humans less capable, we're making that capability inherently collaborative." Captain Vasquez, now serving as coordinator of implementation logistics, took over the presentation. Her military precision had been invaluable in organizing what was essentially the voluntary evolution of an entire species. "The modifications work at 3 levels," she began. "Genetic, psychological, and technological. But each modification is designed not to limit human potential, but to make that potential incomplete without collaboration with other species." A holographic display zoomed in on the genetic modifications first. What it showed was breathtaking in its elegance. Human DNA would be altered, but not simplified. Instead, new genetic sequences would be added that created biological dependencies on compounds that could only be synthesized in partnership with other species. "We're engineering biological collaboration requirements into our genome," Dr. Webb explained. "Humans will remain physically capable, but our enhanced abilities will only function when we're in close contact with diverse biological communities. Our strength becomes symbiotic rather than dominant." Professor Nexeth, who had become one of the project's most enthusiastic supporters, added his analysis. "The psychological modifications are even more remarkable. Human competitive drives are being restructured around collaborative optimization rather than individual or species-level dominance." The display shifted to show neural pathway modifications that would fundamentally alter how humans process challenge and achievement. Instead of seeking to overcome obstacles independently, modified humans would experience satisfaction only when solutions involved successful cooperation with other intelligences. "We're not removing human ambition," Chen clarified. "We're redirecting it toward challenges that require galactic cooperation to solve. Humans will still push boundaries, still seek excellence, still innovate relentlessly. But we'll do it in ways that make other species more capable rather than obsolete." ConstructMind Zephyr 9, who had become the architect's primary liaison to the project, provided the technological component. "The most fascinating element is the technological symbiosis framework. Human innovations will be designed with built-in requirements for maintenance and operation by multiple species." The hologram showed examples of the new technology paradigm. Starships that required both human engineering intuition and Rigelian mathematical precision to navigate. Terraforming systems that combined human adaptability with Altarian biological expertise. Communication networks that functioned optimally only when they incorporated the linguistic capabilities of dozens of different species. "We're creating a technological ecosystem where human excellence amplifies other species rather than replacing them," Dr. Webb added proudly. But the most remarkable presentation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who had arrived from Earth just 3 weeks earlier, represented the voice of humanity itself. She carried with her the results of the most comprehensive democratic process in human history, a global referendum involving every human community, both on Earth and in the colonies. "The vote wasn't close," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of 6 billion human voices. 87% of humanity has chosen to undergo the Symbiosis Protocol modifications. But, more importantly, 96% have voted to support the collaborative framework even without personal modification. The implications were staggering. Humanity had collectively chosen to abandon their evolutionary advantage in favor of something that had never existed before, a species designed for successful cooperation with alien intelligence. But not everyone in the chamber was celebrating. Chancellor Vorthan, his crystalline form still dark with concern, raised the critical questions that haunted every aspect of the project. Dr. Martinez, your species is proposing to fundamentally alter what it means to be human. How can you be certain that the resulting beings will still be recognizably human? Are you not simply choosing a more sophisticated form of extinction?" Dr. Martinez had been expecting this question. "Chancellor, we've spent 6 months examining that exact concern. What we discovered is that humanity has always been defined not by our individual capabilities, but by our responses to challenges." She activated a new section of the display, showing historical analysis of human development throughout their species' history. Every major advancement in human civilization came not from individuals working alone, but from groups finding new ways to collaborate. Language, agriculture, science, space travel, all of it required humans to transcend individual limitations through cooperation. The symbiosis protocol isn't changing human nature, Dr. Webb added. It's optimizing it. We're becoming more human, not less. Oracle Veshtai, her energy patterns showing cautious optimism, posed the next crucial question. But, what of the risk to galactic diversity? How can you ensure that collaborative humanity won't simply create a more sophisticated form of assimilation? Captain Vasquez took this one. Because the modifications make it impossible. The protocol includes built-in diversity preservation mechanisms. Modified humans literally cannot function in homogeneous environments. We become biologically and psychologically dependent on maintaining and enhancing the differences between species. The holographic display showed projection models for the next 1,000 years of galactic development under the symbiosis protocol. Instead of the steady convergence toward human optimal solutions that had terrified the Council, the models showed increasing diversification and specialization among all species. Humans become the galaxy's collaboration specialists, Chen explained. We excel at finding ways for different species to work together more effectively, but we can't replace them because our own functionality depends on their unique contributions. Pre-March Koldar's mechanical voice carried a note of something that might have been wonder. You're proposing to engineer yourselves into obligate cooperators. A species that can only thrive by making others thrive. Exactly, Dr. Martinez confirmed. And, the beautiful thing is that it works both ways. Other species become more successful through collaboration with humans, while humans become more successful through collaboration with other species. It's true symbiosis. But, the most important validation came from the observers themselves. Witness Prime Temporal 7 had remained silent throughout the presentations, its multidimensional presence impossible to read. Now it spoke for the first time in months. The symbiosis protocol represents a novel solution to the test of galactic unity, it announced, its voice resonating across dimensions. Previous civilizations attempted to solve the problem through limitation or control. Humanity has chosen enhancement through interdependence. The chamber fell silent as the implications of that approval sank in. Furthermore, another observer added, the protocol addresses the fundamental flaw that destroyed previous iterations. Earlier civilizations failed because they created temporary solutions. The symbiosis protocol creates permanent structural changes that become stronger over time rather than weaker. The third observer that had spoken before made what might have been the most important statement in galactic history. The test phase may be concluded. Implementation may proceed. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the Great Council had ever witnessed. 800 civilizations, representing trillions of beings, erupted in expressions of relief and joy that transcended species boundaries. Humanity had not just found a solution to their impossible test, they had found a solution that made everyone stronger. But, Ambassador Chen, watching the celebration, felt the weight of what they had chosen. In 6 months, the first volunteer groups would begin undergoing the symbiosis protocol modifications. Within 10 years, the majority of humanity would be fundamentally different from the species that had first reached for the stars. They were giving up the right to be perfect. They were choosing instead the opportunity to be essential. Any regrets? Dr. Webb asked quietly as they watched their fellow humans celebrating with alien colleagues who were no longer alien. Chen considered the question seriously. Humanity would never again be able to simply overwhelm challenges through superior capability. They would always need others, always be dependent on the success of species they were working to protect. In a very real sense, they were choosing to become vulnerable. No, she said finally. We're not becoming less than we were. We're becoming more than we ever could have been alone. Captain Vasquez overheard and added her own perspective. Besides, think about it, we're still going to be the best at something. We're going to be the best at making everyone else better. Dr. Martinez joined their group, carrying reports from Earth about the preparation for the first modification procedures. You know what the most amazing thing is, she said. 90% of the volunteers for the first wave are from the most competitive sectors of human society. Athletes, military personnel, academics, entrepreneurs. The people who excel at individual achievement are the most excited about becoming collaborative. Chen smiled, understanding finally why humanity had been placed on Hadal Kathath, why they had been forged in the universe's most perfect crucible. Not to dominate the galaxy, but to save it. Not to replace diversity, but to weave it together into something stronger than any individual species could ever be. They were still the children of the Death World. But now they were something else as well. They were the galaxy's hope for a future where being different was an advantage, where cooperation was strength, and where the greatest challenge humanity could face was the challenge of helping everyone else face theirs. The test was over. The real work was just beginning. And, for the first time since they had learned their true nature, Ambassador Chen was certain that humanity had chosen correctly. They were about to become something the galaxy had never seen before, a perfect species designed specifically to make every other species perfect too. The stars were waiting, and, this time, humanity would reach them hand in hand with everyone else.